So, hey guys, Chowser here. So yeah, I saw a post on Reddit about limit break abilities, and I've actually been meaning to do this for a while. I just needed a kick in the butt, really, so you can say I got that. So I finally just took the time, put all the limit break abilities in a quotation marks tier list. But yeah, this is basically just a grouping, and the only real tiers here are like the bottom and the top. Like the rest are hard to rate and are useful in different ways. Anyway, this is just something we can discuss. I thought I'd go through all of them. If we start at the bottom with Undesirable, and I'd say there are only two limit abilities in the game that you do not want on a unit, and it's the critical hit and the unchangeable slot resistant, or a changeable lock it's called, I guess. Anyway, some might be surprised to see crit here, and yeah, I must agree, like, for a long time I've always viewed crit positive. But first, we need to distinguish between normal crit and 100% crit. As you see, I've separated them, so we'll talk about 100% later, but for like 99% of the crits in the game that aren't 100%, it's actually a detriment since OPTC is a lot about minimizing RNG. There's not a lot of RNG in general, and one of the few sources of RNG is the crit. Like the only time you really notice crit is when you make a team where the damage is so tight that you suddenly notice that a team doesn't work because you don't get a crit. This hasn't happened to me for some time, but it has happened on numerous occasions, and it's just very frustrating because, like, when you build a team, it's not like you can test it over and over just to see, like, oh, how about crit? Does that make a difference? No. What happens is that suddenly you get people using your team. I'm speaking as a team builder now, and they just say, I have everything the same, but I can't kill the final stage. And then we notice, like, oh, it's crit dependent, and it just sucks. So yeah, sure, you can get extra damage, but it's not worth the unreliability, and the extra damage you can get is not that much. We'll get to that later. Anyway, that's enough crit talk. Let's get on to the unchangeable lock resistance. And this is so strange because in almost every scenario so far, unchangeable locks is a buff. It's something you desire to have. It's the most powerful lock mechanic in the game. You keep the orb you want for as long as possible. And I must say that if the unchangeable lock resistance was a team-wide resistance, then it will be a different discussion. But it's only for the unit itself, which is what makes it so bad. Because the way I handle unchangeable locks is that either you try and remove it, or you just accept it. There is really no middle ground. And this would only be good if a middle ground was something you could go for. Like, for it to be usable at all now, we'd need tons of unchangeable lock resistance on a team. And team building just doesn't work like that. Like, even if it was a more common tablet, like, that's still a very hard hurdle to clear. And it's just a dumb hurdle to clear in the first place because unchangeable locks are so good to abuse. So I have no idea why they added this to the game, but thankfully they've not used it that much yet. I think on JP only 3 Legends has it, so yeah. Hopefully they just rework it or don't release more units with it. Anyway, on to like the tier-less middle ground where we have a lot of different categories. We'll start off with passive effects. It's all the damage reductions. I don't really want to call them bad, but it's just that it's very rare that you notice them making a difference. Like, there are sometimes content where damage reduction matters. I made teams like that for sure. But, like, as long as you rainbow all units, the damage reduction passive effects are just there. You can't do anything about them. It's not like you change a unit because, oh, damage reduction tablets. No, you need the kit, and this is just the bonus. Like, in that way, like stuff like damage reduction supports can actually be more useful since you can control that. But yeah, at the same time, they are invincible, and you might get their benefit and not know about it, and that's still better than not getting any benefit at all, never. So, still not bad in that way, but still not a super desirable limit break ability for sure. It's not something you get hyped by seeing on a new legend, for example. Anyway, then we have pinch healing, and it will be pretty good if One Piece Treasure Cruise had a lot more varied content, with longer content being more common, but in reality, that's not the case. Like, all content we get nowadays is short, and pinch healing matters very little then. But it can be fun, especially when you got like captains who also adds healing. In the captain effect when hitting perfect, so you can stack both pinch healing and hitting perfect healing together. It's useful on like Tokina, for example, very noticeable if you see the teams I made with her. But also a little bit older legends like Super Type Sabo and such can make good use of that effect. So yeah, good to have, but considering the current state of OPTC, it's not an effect you're hyped to see. Okay, let's get on to extra damage. So let's talk 100% crit a bit. While it's obviously more useful than random crit, 100% crit still doesn't matter super much because the extra damage you get is not that high. Like, it might say, for example, that you have a 100% chance to do 10% extra damage, but that's not 10% extra damage of your overall damage. It's 10% extra damage of your final combo hit. So it doesn't turn out to be that much extra damage. I'm not like an expert on this. I'm not going to say the exact value of how much damage you do. But let's just say it's not 10% extra damage. It's a lot less than that. That said, some kits really benefit from the 100% crit. Two obvious ones are Lufla and Roger. And Roger is because he's just carried by like having one of the highest attack stats in the game, and it's just even higher with the 100% crit. So you always feel like Roger does a ton of damage. And on Lufla, it's because you can abuse his swap so much, so you just get extra damage naturally. So those are the best uses of 100% crit right now, I feel. But I definitely think 100% crit should be more common since RNG crit is useless, as I've already talked about. Moving on. We have some content dependent limit break abilities. I've listed them from left to right, with the ones to the left being more impactful and the ones to the right not being as impactful. And yeah, we have Slotbind first, and yeah, like unless the enemy has Slotbind, it's irrelevant, and Slotbind is not super common. Not that uncommon, but not super common. But yeah, like if you have a counter with Slotbind, you can't just ignore it most of the time. You just lose too much damage by not having any matching orbs. So in that sense, Slotbind is always great to have, since there will be content with Slotbind, and without it, you will just not do damage at all, basically. Fear is pretty similar, like there's not super much content with Fear, but when a content does have Fear, you need to have a plan, and the easiest plan is for a unit to resist Fear. And you can resist it in different ways. Usually it's resisting special bind or special reverse and dealing with that. But like sometimes you might have other sailors, like matching orbs and such. And having Fear just means that against Fear content, you can just ignore that part. Like you know that your orb will be matching even against Fear. So that's nice. Moving on, we have an Unreleased. Limit break ability is the only Unreleased one. And basically, this is just a personal guess, but I imagine this will be a resist to the special limit. Like we have a debuff that enemies can apply that only lets you use a certain number of specials per turn. And the only way to remove it right now is like we want Shirahoshi special or Straw Hat Crew like that can remove any debuff. But basically the logical thing will be that this Limb Break ability will naturally resist that. And that will obviously be super powerful because not being able to use specials really sucks. So being able to remove that without doing anything will be super powerful. At the same time, it's often the case that when that debuff is applied, it's applied by like 99 turns, and that's just hopeless. And it's probably just like to not let you cheese it with V1 Shirahoshi and Manchu, for example. But yeah, I like this Limb Break ability to be released at least. It looks very promising. Moving on, we have Shipbind, which is probably the Limb Break ability to get the most unwarranted trash talk in the game. Like, I know Shipbind debuff is not that common, and even if it's a thing, you can often ignore it. But your life is a lot easier if you remove the Shipbind with Shipbind tablets. I've Limb Break expanded a lot of units just to use Shipbind, and they never disappoint. It just feels a lot better to naturally remove the Shipbind. If anything, I wish Shipbind was more common, so it would feel more useful. But yeah, it is what it is. It does make a lot of difference damage-wise, like losing the ship and maybe losing each ship perfect and such. It's super feel bad. But of course the damage doesn't matter as much as like with Slotbind, for example. That's a much bigger loss. Moving on, we have Recover Bind and Decreased Healing. And yeah, I feel like Recover Bind is one of those that also people feel is pretty good. But if you think about it logically, like it rarely matters a lot. Like I definitely say Shipbind is better for sure. Like you get extra damage with that. Usually not being able to heal doesn't really matter because it's not like we stall a lot in content. Not to say that it's useless, it can definitely be useful. Even in normal content if like death damage is a thing, for example. But yeah, it's not something you're happy to see, in my opinion. Decreased healing is even worse since you can still heal with that, just not as much. And that is an even more rarer debuff. But at the same time, it's so rare, so the few units who has it, you can have some fun memeing with, like against Doffy 2, for example, has a stage with decreased healing that you can remove it like Legend Bonnie, for example. Still not a super hype Limb Break ability for sure. Moving on, we have two more content-dependent Limb Break abilities that also add extra damage. First we have Hunger, super good because it's the best way to remove the Hunger debuff, which is actually pretty common. But you do have other options like consuming Recovery Orbs. You also do extra damage when you consume Recovery Orbs, but that's usually not something you think about much, in my opinion. It's like a small extra bonus. Moving on, we have the increased damage taken, like enrage is called, which before just let you do more damage if you took damage the last turn. Now it also removes the increased damage taken debuff, and that's actually super useful. I'm like when it happens, you're always happy to see it, like especially against like recently we have the raid Marco, for example, and like having the enrage Limb Break ability was just essential for many teams because you took too much damage to handle otherwise. So yeah, definitely very nice, and it also has an easy condition to do more damage, so yeah, it's a pretty good Limb Break ability. Finally, we have the overall most useful ones, and these are the ones you're never mad to see on a unit. Technically, Barrier Pen is content dependent, but barriers are just so common that, in my opinion, it's not really content dependent. You're always happy to have Barrier Pen. It's just a super big win. And like now you can also like remove the barrier while hitting through it, thanks to the buff Barry Penn got like half a year ago. See, I have no doubt that Barry Penn is the best one, and you're always happy to see a unit get it. Then we have 2 CD limit break abilities. First is double special, and obviously being able to use a special twice is just a lot more flexibility. And I hope that the future of the game has more double special, since it's very interesting. And like a special gets better, like double specials will also get better. So that will be very interesting to see. And we even have Legends with double special now, like only V2 Magellan so far, but it really defines him a lot, I feel, and makes him a lot more interesting. Then we have decreased special charge, and also super powerful, like you can have your special ready a lot earlier, and it just means less potential stalling at least, so that's never bad. Always good to see that. Finally, we have final tap, or last tap on JP, and very hard to rate. I still think it's super overrated. It's not that big of a deal, but at the same time, all the final taps at the moment are nice, even at lower levels, like Last Tap Kid, for example. Like, just having that ability to hit all units final stage when you attack, super powerful. Yamato at low levels do a lot of extra damage. Law only needs like level 3 to also do Death Down and do more damage against it. Like, it can be niche, but it can also be powerful, and final tap will just get better as well and more useful. So it's hard to get upset about a unit having final tap. Its availability is another discussion, but I hope you are saving your final tap tablets at least, because at the moment there's none that is really worth going hard for. Like, if you just save your final tap tablets, you'll have enough to max out whatever units release for JP Annie. And there might be like some super worth unit there, and you can just rainbow them instantly if they are worth it. So I recommend doing that. But yeah, that's every limit break ability in the game. I hope this video was informative. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.